Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to our February Connect. In this video, we will review the new features of the Accounting Translator, integrations, and the Universal Reconciliator, along with the latest updates and advanced reconciliations. Let's start with the Accounting Translator. So the first thing we have from the Accounting Translator is a completely new system of self-managed connections. This allows them to have a fully self-managed connection system to the ERP. For those who struggled with it before, the process required complex support. However, starting with this new version, that is no longer the case. Now everyone can create their connections independently. They have all the logic they need to connect to the ERP, assign numbering to their journal entries, and define in a productized way the different moments when an entry should be posted or marked as failed. Additionally, they will be able to manage their connections. This is crucial, as it will significantly accelerate the value they get from the tool. We're talking about an improvement timeline that used to take 3 to 4 weeks, now reduced to a day or even just a few hours. We have invested a great deal of effort and advanced technology to make this process incredibly fast for you. In addition to this improvement and the introduction of the fully self-managed connection system, we will also enable the configuration of journal entry cancellations within the system. What will this allow? How will it help? Essentially, it eliminates a previous layer of support and back-office operations, empowering users and their technical teams to independently manage, self-manage, and edit their journal entry cancellations based on their own understanding. This impacts both structures and accounting models. For those unfamiliar with them, you can reach out to your CSM to learn more or request additional information. Additionally, we have another major improvement. This introduces a new perspective on your data within the translator, allowing you to better understand your information structure, duplicate it, edit it, and track how the data is being sent to your ERP, something that was not possible before. It will also have a significant impact on the speed at which new use cases can be implemented. Ultimately, version 1.0 is heavily focused on self-management and drastically reducing the time it takes to transfer information from Symmetric to your ERP. Great. Now let's move on to the latest updates and integrations. The goal today is to give you a brief overview of what our version 2 contains. Our version 2 of integrations is heavily focused on unlocking new features to provide you with self-management, flexibility, scalability, and above all, visibility into the integration process, which currently can feel like a black box, as you know, since they are supported by our professional services team. This version introduces something very important, the concept of repositories. These repositories are designed to give you the flexibility to decide how you want to manage, receive, process, and store the files that will enter the platform, whether manually or automatically. These repositories will also come with a set of configurations that will allow you, the users, to define the input and output properties for each repository. This gives you greater control over what you want to do with those files. As part of this version, we are also introducing a new menu from which we will gradually add more types or methods of connection. In this first phase, we are launching a connection method called SFTP push. What we're aiming for here is to give you the ability to create a connection through which you can automatically send files to Symmetric. Alternatively, you can take advantage of a connection we have available for everyone, which is the Symmetric Services connection. This connection allows you to control how our professional services team will store, or more specifically, feed data into each of the repositories you create on the platform. We will provide a level of visibility for these repositories so that you always have a clear understanding of the connection link to automatically feed the repository. Additionally, at the processing options level, you will be able to configure output settings that allow you to create sources for the Universal Reconciliator. This will ensure that the source is fed to the files from this repository. You'll be able to define the name you want for that source and will always have redirection options between both modules, giving you clarity on which source and repository are connected. In this version, for each repository, you will also notice a new version of the File Manager. The File Manager currently resides within the Reconciler, and it is an integral part of the sources. The idea is for the file management process to be fully integrated into the integrations. This way, over time, we will also be able to offer you different options to process those files or use that information. In the first phase, as I mentioned earlier, we will be connected solely to the Universal Reconciliator. The goal with this file manager is to ensure that you retain at least the same capabilities you currently have in the reconciler. This includes uploading, managing, and viewing files. We will maintain the same supported formats as today, including Excel, CSV, and TXT files. We will also allow you to have options for deleting, downloading, and removing files. The big new feature of this file manager is that we will introduce 2 status columns so you can distinguish what's happening at different stages of how we process those files. There will be states closely related to the upload process, meaning when you send the information automatically or upload it manually, and it becomes visible at the repository level. Additionally, there will be processing states, which are closely tied to everything happening at the reconciler level with those records. When the repository is linked to a reconciler source, and the reconciler begins to load those files, or if the source was emptied or is being reprocessed, etc., in the output or processing status column, you will have visibility into exactly what happened to the records associated with the files stored in the repository. Last but not least, we have the Input Connections menu. As I mentioned earlier, input connections are the way you will begin to have self-management options and visibility into new configurations or integrations at the platform level. Here, we will have the SFTP push, where you will be able to create your connection, assign a name, provide a public key that we will store, and connect through external mechanisms. This will allow you to send files to us, and they will be reflected in the repository. You will also always have the services connection available. This connection will be accessible for each workspace you have on the platform. The idea behind this connection is that you can associate it with repositories that today are fed through an integration process assisted by the services team. You will also have the option to link or unlink these connections to different repositories, depending on how you want the information to be automatically fed into Symmetric. The idea behind this menu is to gradually add new types of connections over time. Currently, we only have these 2 available. By mid-year, the plan is to start adding SFTP pull, where we'll be responsible for extracting files. Throughout the year, you will begin to see a broader range of connection options to meet each of your needs. All right, team. So what started happening is that until the end of last year, the integrations module only allowed access to users who had subscribed to data export. The idea with this version is that it will be a freely accessible module for all our users. Every time they log into the platform, they will find a repositories menu in the side panel with this interface. Here, users will be able to create repositories where they can store new files. The creation process is quite simple. The idea is to assign a name to the repository and optionally add a description to provide more details about its intended use. Once created, the system will take users to the Configuration tab, where the setup is based on these 3 menus. The Input Configuration menu allows users to select a connection from those they have previously created. The default service connection will always be available, along with any other connections users create as needed. The process for service connection and SFTP push connection, which is the one currently available, is quite simple. Users just need to select it and save the configuration based on their selection. As a result of saving the configuration, the platform will display the connection details linked to the bucket. For the service connection, an important detail is that users will see their account data, workspace, and bucket ID. This allows them to include this information directly in the support ticket when requesting an assisted integration from the services team. This way, once the integration is created with the assistance of our services team, users will start receiving information automatically in that bucket. If for any reason they no longer want to use a service connection and have a new custom connection, they can go back to the same repository and unlink the previously assigned connection to replace it with one that better fits their current needs. For the service connection, if at any point they decide to switch to a new custom connection, they can simply go to the same bucket. Unlink the previously assigned connection and replace it with one that better suits their current needs. For any other push-type connections, the information provided upon saving will include the host or URL that you will need to connect to automatically, the specific path that will allow you to feed this particular repository, and the user with which you should authenticate. This, along with the public and private keys provided at the time of creation, will allow you to connect and upload files to this bucket. On the output configuration side, what you as users will define is who will process the files that we are leaving in the bucket. In this first version, it will only be the universal reconciliator. The idea is to do this through the creation of new sources. This flow doesn't change compared to how it works in the reconciliator. The idea is also that you assign a name to your source, and automatically at the moment of creation, we will ensure that the system connects that source with this bucket. Here, something very interesting is that we will always provide the source ID that was connected, along with a direct hyperlink so you can easily access it. On the property side, we are giving you more visibility and control. Currently, you know that the process of duplicate management or fingerprint management is something that the source acquires as a property and is always active. If you wish to remove it, it can be done per resource and must be requested through a support ticket. The idea is that at the repository level, supervisor users will have greater control over such actions and can decide whether they want the files entering this particular repository to be checked for duplicates or not. This way, we also prevent repositories connected to the Reconciliator from receiving duplicate information in case a duplicate check is not active. Additionally, considering the feedback we've received from various clients, we've added a second property related to deleted files. This property will essentially allow you to ensure that any file in the repository with a deleted status, whether incoming or outgoing, will not be visible in the file manager if the check is active. This will prevent users from accessing download actions and, of course, deletion actions. This way, we prevent deleted files, those that you as clients may not want others to access or download, from being available for such actions. Input connections provide a very simple view. The idea of this view is to give you visibility into the inventory of available connections. Here, service connection will always be the first on the list. It is a symmetric connection, one that we provide. You will always have visibility into how many buckets are being fed through that connection. The other connections are ones that you will create. In the Edit view, you will primarily see the connections details, the name, the type, and on the right, all the buckets that are linked and used in that connection. For each bucket, you will have the bucket name, the ID with a copy action, in case you need any support, a direct hyperlink to that bucket for better clarity on the type of information stored there, and also details related to the creation flow. As I mentioned, at this moment, we only have SFTP push, which essentially allows you as users to send files to that connection to upload them to the bucket. You will be able to assign a name that makes it easy to identify. The creation process only requires you to paste the public key that you will use to connect externally in this field. Once we have that ready for display, we will show you a summary of that data. The key will no longer be visible and will not be an editable field. So it is important that you carefully save your keys for when you need to connect. On the right-hand side, you will always have the URL, the host to which you need to connect, and the user that we provide for that. Based on the linked buckets, you will need to complete this host with the path or repository ID that you want to feed. Great. Now, let's move forward with the new features of the Universal Reconciliator, which were released in February, version 1.1. Version 1.1 was marked by the launch of advanced reconciliations aimed at significantly simplifying not only the configuration processes but also the processing of reconciliations. Thus, advanced reconciliations emerge, featuring a series of additional configurations, such as compensations, essentially a compensation sweep, without the need to create intermediate reconciliations. This even includes group sweeps, where I configure a grouping criterion. Once the records are grouped, I proceed to find the match, but the result is presented in a detailed manner. This avoids having to create reconciliations in pieces, where I first match a source against itself to compensate or create a zero effect. Only then do I proceed with another reconciliation for the remaining items to match the counterpart. Then, the remaining items need to be reconciled with something grouped, using a database that requires prior grouping. I need to group them first before reconciling. The idea is to continuously evolve these advanced reconciliations so that what is currently done in separate steps, reconciliation by reconciliation, can be executed within a single configuration. This significantly reduces build times and will greatly decrease processing times, since executing the entire chain takes much longer than processing a single configuration. For version 101, we are launching a new feature called segmentation. What is segmentation? It allows me to select either side A or side B and choose a reconcilable group from those databases to generate the reconciliation. Segmentation has an additional level of customization, allowing me to break that information into smaller pieces and configure those pieces within the sweeps. How will those pieces be divided? They will be split by a column. The user sets a column, and the distinct values in that column will define the segments. For example, if I have a column called transaction type, and I select that as a segmentation criterion, and it has 3 values, chargebacks, credits, and debits, then I'll be able to segment the database. In other words, that side of the reconciliation will be split into those 3 parts, chargebacks, credits, and debits. The purpose is that when I am configuring a sweep within the reconciliation, I can specify which segment I want the sweep to apply to, whether it's credits, debits, or chargebacks. Exactly. The goal is to increase the levels of customization in the configuration. The objective of these advanced reconciliations is to streamline the process that, with the current reconciliations, requires breaking things into pieces. For example, I match source A against source B, and it results in a reconciliation and a pending amount. But then I need to take that pending amount and match it against source C, either because it needs to be grouped or because it has a particular logic. Exactly, then that becomes another reconciliation with a new pending amount. I can create several configurations this way, but it turns into a long chain that can sometimes be difficult to read and interpret. With advanced reconciliations, the goal is to reduce those configurations so everything can be done in a single configuration, making the process more efficient and easier to manage. Exactly. With segmentation, we can take source A, for example, and say, look, I want this segment, this part of source A to go against this other part of side B, and this other part of side A to go against source C. This allows for even more specific and tailored configurations, optimizing the reconciliation process. Why? The reason for this is that different segments may follow different logics, and you don't want those logics to get mixed up. By using segmentation, it allows you to ensure that reconciliations happen according to the correct logic for each segment. This prevents items that should be reconciled under different rules from being incorrectly matched together, giving you more control and precision in the reconciliation process. This will be very powerful with unions, so that I can combine multiple sources in a single union and use the source name as the segmentation criterion. This way, the entire union will be divided by each of its sources, and I can apply sweeps and logics for each individual source. This is a much more visual example. If we have side A and side B, on side A, I select the brand column as the segmentation criterion. This will split the transactions into 3 segments based on the distinct values in the brand column. Segment 1, those with Visa. Segment 2, those with MasterCard. Segment 3, segment 3, those with Amex. And on side B, I am selecting another segmentation criterion, which is the franchise column. So it separates the values in such a way that segment 1, those with value 3. Segment 2, those with value 6. And segment 3, those with value 4. The user configures this saying, I want segment 1 to go against Visa or segment 2 to go against MasterCard. The user has the ability to make this configuration. We'll see this quickly in the tool shortly. Then when I enter the sweeps, I can specify which segment I want to reconcile. So when I'm configuring, I can say sweep 1, which is reconciliation or compensation rules, or let's say with group calculations or group sweeps, I can make segment 1 match against segment 3, for example. Next sweep, I can make segment 2 match against segment 1. Next sweep, I can make segment 3 match against segment 2. And I can apply any combinations or logics I need. Now let's see how we can do this in symmetric application. Here, what we do is select side A. In this case, I'm selecting the acquirer source. And on side B, I'm selecting a database called Union Site. Here is where the segment configuration comes in. I can configure it for both sides. In this case, I will configure it for the union. I specify that the column I want to segment by can be any of the available options, but since this is a union, I choose to divide it by each of the sources that make up that union. So I select the origin source. And here I can create segments, up to 25 segments. This source column has 3 values, PTM NAKI, site, and sitemer BC. I can say that segment 1 is site, segment 2 will be site PSE, or any of the other 2 options. I can even leave it like this. I don't have to select all 3 segments. And then we confirm. If I don't select the other segment, that will depend on the sweep configuration, what information I'm selecting when I enter the sweep to configure it. So here's the flow, whether it's a reconciliation sweep, an offset sweep, or a zero affect sweep. But in this case, notice that I didn't apply any segmentation to side A. So every time the sweep runs, it will consider 100% of side A. However, I segmented side B. Therefore, for this specific sweep, I can choose whether I want it to consider the entire side B or just one of the segments I configured. So I can say, take only the site and then generate the reconciliation rules I deem necessary, whether it's by group calculation or without grouping. I can select the combination of rules that I consider appropriate. Then I can add another sweep, in this case sweep 2, and again specify, look, I don't want this to apply to site, but rather to site PSE. And here I can have a completely different logic from sweep 1. What will happen when sweep 1 runs? It will only take these pieces of information from the total data, and then it will look for the match based on the configured parameters. And in sweep 2, it's the same. But this adds a level of customization where it's not just about the matching criteria. It's about the specific information I want to match based on a certain logic. Now let's go back to the slides. Additionally, we've added the manual reconciliation feature. This wasn't included in the January release of version 1.0, but we are adding it now. The manual reconciliation feature incorporates a lot of the feedback we've received. This new manual reconciliation interaction allows me to perform one-to-one reconciliations or reconcile in batches, including multiple batches at once. So, the interaction as shown on the screen is as follows. The user selects a transaction from one side, selects one or more transactions from side A, then selects one or more transactions from side B. Below there is an option labeled New Group. When the user selects a new group, that group gets locked, meaning the set of transactions from side A will reconcile manually with the set of transactions from side B. The user is then given the option to create a new group, another set of transactions from side A against another set of transactions from side B. In this way, the user can create multiple groups and initiate multiple manual reconciliations in a single action. This interaction is available for advanced reconciliations. For current reconciliations, the interaction remains the same. We've reached the end of our Connect. Remember, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to your CSM. I hope you enjoyed the new updates in Symmetric. See you in the next video.